Hi, it's Stu, and yes, this is another haul video. No book mail, just all the fun thrifting, friends of the library, little free library, thrift stores, book exchanges. So much fun, such a bookish week. I'm gonna have to spend a lot of time sort of rearranging my space after this, which kind of excites me. And let's just get into it. So Red Crosses by Sasha Filipenko. I believe this is a Europa edition, so I have a special shelf for my Europa edition. I know where this is going. This is the contemporary Russian author, and to be honest, so it's translated, so let me tell you the translator. Oh, yeah, because it's not on the front. Unfortunately, I have to go into the book. By Brian James Baer and Ellen Vanier. I spent a little time upon hauling this book talking with someone who speaks the Russian language, explaining that, you know, I know classics, but not contemporary Russian literature. So I'm excited to have my hands on this. There seems to be a bit of an age gap friendship in this, and some work with memory. I mean, there might be an Alzheimer's situation. It also looks like, oh, and there's a word for this. And by the next time I make a video, I'm gonna know this word or remember this word. So like use of sort of multimedia in this book. I can see different forms of media happening in here. Even a telegram. Okay, I'm gonna have to go faster than that if I'm gonna get through all these books. The Chosen and the Beautiful by Neville. This is a retelling, I believe a Sapphic and more modern, of course, retelling of The Gatsby. Super familiar with The Gatsby. I do like retellings. It's a story that's retold a lot because I feel like it's a really retellable story, and there's lots of pieces of it to grab onto regarding the sort of social commentary of sort of socialites of the time. Somebody who had this book smoked, and as I just flipped through it, that did not excite me, and so this one might not go actually on my shelves. Maybe I'll put it in a very airy place. Anyway, I'm excited for this book. Oh, adding to my Zadie Smith collection, which is right here behind me. I'm hoping to get to read On Beauty in the next couple of weeks, and so I have NW. When I see it, I think that means Northwest, but I don't know. Found this at the Friends of the Library, was excited. I have only read one, Zadie Smith, which was Swing Time, and I loved the writing style, but couldn't jive with the book. So I hope that my extensive collection of her works out for me. Because again, when I like the writing style, but not the book, I don't feel too nervous, but it's something to have a whole lot of books by an author you have yet to enjoy. Anyway, Sing to It, Amy Hempel. This is a fantastic cover. This book was given to me, and it's short stories. Actually might get to this. It's very small, and I try to get to one short story collection sort of per pile of possibility per month, and I think this one might just get thrown in. The Cat Who Saved the Books, a book in translation. The translator is on the front. It's Louise Heel Kawai, and the author is Sosuke Natsukawa. I mean, this is about a cat who saves books. I know there's a whole genre of like Japanese literature, and I dig it. I like it. I even have the cozy cat shelf. Books that one needs to read after they read something really emotionally heavy. That's what I say. Speaking of emotionally heavy, Chlorine by Jade Song. From what I understand about this book, Jade Song, they was a professional swimmer. So there's pools and water in this book, and it's sapphic and sort of genre defying genre bending, which when I hauled this book, it was exactly, I was talking with someone about how I kind of like books like that. I don't want to read them regularly, but I like them in my reading repertoire. Small Mercies by Dennis Lehane. I think this book got some hype some years ago. This is an incident. This is a historical fiction. It's about an incident in English history, 1974. I'm saying English now, but I'm it's giving everything about the States. Yeah, Boston. And that's why we have this author who's writing about an incident, maybe a highly racialized incident in Boston in this Irish American community. Next I have Kuleana by Sarah K. Haulani Gu. This author is a journalist. This is a memoir. Not so into memoir, but I was convinced to take this. The last year I read Shark Dialogues, and it was if I go back and watch that video, it was hard for me to get through. It was really, really dense. There was a lot of Hawaiian history that I just didn't know, that I'm kind of like, I'm glad the author included it, but it slogged me down a little. So because of my interest there, I think a memoir about a family land and the legacy of old Hawaii would be a fantastic entry point into not having to slog through necessarily all the character development, the magic realism that the author of Shark Dialogues did so wonderfully, but just to kind of get into sort of a personal view of a story of land, legacy, and old Hawaii. I do read nonfiction from time to time. My nonfiction shelf admittedly gets a lot of neglect. I absolutely have people who would want and love this book after I get to it, or maybe even not get to it and just pass it along. Speaking of islands, I got Isola by Allegra Goodman, and this is a deserted island setting scenario where there's some there's tension, and these sort of these atmospheric settings of deserted islands. Well, I thought, for example, in Wild Dark Shore, Charlotte McConaughey did that well. I just didn't like, the other elements, like the suspense and romance elements of that book. But I do tend to like these books that create these atmospheres, especially around islands and isolation, kind of extreme conditions. Anyway, that's what I know about this book. There's some exile or abandonment, which has an historical place as well in human history. Which brings me to Mette Jacobsen's The Vanishing Act. Mette Jacobsen is an Australian author born in Denmark, and the setting of this is an isolated snowy island. And again, we have a lot of atmosphere being built, and there's a situation where I believe it's a mother disappears. And so I really held this book because that I do like that vibe, and I tend to enjoy books like that. It's, again, kind of small books don't feel like that big of a commitment, but Erin Mortensen gave the blurb on the front, and I did really, really love The Night Circus. So I'll take it on advisement. Another book translated from the Japanese. This author is Taichi Yamada, and the translator is Wayne P. Lammers. And this is All of Us Strangers. It's obviously becoming a movie. I brought this to a brunch situation, and a lot of people talked about it. They're familiar with it. However, nobody had read it. And it's a book that will get passed on to that location because there was a lot of interest in this book, which means I will plan to get to this sooner rather than later, like in the next month, latest 2. Again, it's not a very big commitment. And if my TBR weren't just so heavy right now, trying to read the Women's Prize for Fiction long list, etc., then I would just bump this up because of the excitement around this book. I don't know a whole lot of the premise, but a lot of people did. And ghost story kind of situation is what I was getting the vibe of this book. Anyway, Boneless Mercies. I had a lot of books in this haul with mercy just like there's several about islands. Anyway, this is young adult fantasy, sort of female vibes. And I don't have very much room on my young adult shelf, but I am going to read soon-ish the next V.E. Schwab, the second in the trilogy that I own. And then this is, waiting to sneak into that place for when, sometimes really visiting young adult literature is both refreshing and also sort of anchoring. And I got enough vibe from that one that it could be, don't really jive with fantasy very well these days, but I want to continue to stay open-minded. All of us readers know that it's sometimes not even the genre or the book, it's the reader in it, not even the reader, it's the timing when it's being read, what's going on in the other reading universe, but also in the life. Bright Objects by Ruby Todd. Has this been made into an adaptation? Perhaps. This is a celestial story. It's an Australian author and setting, and I believe there is, the car crash trope where family members die and we're going to deal with grief and maybe some guilt, and tie it all together with the universe or the celestial beings. It's a beautiful book. Because I have so many books, and that's a problem with having so many books, you start to wonder, when will I get to this book? And why do I want to own it if I'm not going to get to it for a very long time? But I do feel like there's a space for wanting to read this particular kind of book. And it did kind of remind me a little bit of the Richard Powers Bewilderment kind of vibe. And I really liked Bewilderment. Of course, Toni Morrison is a must grab if I don't already have an edition, because this is one of the only authors of which I keep the collection. And this is A Mercy. This I also brought to the brunch situation, and people had read it and talked about it extensively. Because this is one of Toni's later publications, 2008, it's very likely that I didn't read it because this is post me being a mom. And I'm almost positive I read no Toni after motherhood, and most of it actually was college, right after college kind of situation. So I'm excited to put another Toni in my collection and keep going until I find them all in this thrifting way. I have a couple of little free library finds that this won't be the extent of them, but that I like to keep a little stack and say, if it comes around to I just want to be experimental, I know I don't have a whole lot of hope or hype around the book, and/or if I don't get to it, I just take them back out into little free libraries. So I am giving memoir and romance a chance in this stack, not because I particularly have any strong feelings to wanting to like them. I just, I want to stay open-minded, and little free library swapping is one of the ways that I do that. And this little, have a little stack that it's kind of like my mystery thriller shelf. Like if I don't read, if I go over what fits on it, I just unhaul something unread or put it in a reader on haul for that week. So that I don't just take a whole bunch of mystery thrillers when I like to read them, but it's not the way that I feel, obviously, like about lit fic. So we have Cheat Day by Liv Stratman. This is also an ARC. I love to keep ARCs in circulation. I don't think this book, I did look up the reviews of this book because it's a commercial book. And I think reviews on commercial books, like popular reviews on commercial books, tend to be reliable. Popular reviews on works of literature a little less reliable. You have to kind of know who's the reviewers and looked that way. But Cheat Day didn't have a great review, but I liked the premise. I read the back of this book, and the premise is we have a couple, and I'm not quite sure what the romance is, and or am I very interested, but the premise is they're doing these fad diets, And I can really relate. Like in my 30s, I couldn't say that I was really a fad dieter, but I was really into wellness and fitness, and then started to realize how much toxicity was in that place. And I'm really glad to be, well into my middle ages and wanting to really focus on holistic health, not on aesthetics, and or get caught up in like these trends. So this spoke to me, and I wondered if it was going to do some commentary to things that I kind of went through, and it could help me like reflect on a period of my life. And that's why it's going to be in my stacks. The Woman in the Green Dress by Tia Cooper is an Australian author, and I'm just kind of in my Australian era. Not reading very many Australian authors. I just finished a Geraldine Brooks book, but just kind of noticing that Australian authors don't get a whole lot of space on American bookshelves, and especially in this sort of thrifting situation. So The Woman in Green Dress, I believe the setting is actually London, and it's a romance, and that's all I have to say. It gives me kind of TGR, Taylor Jenkins Reid vibes, which, I like her fine. Actually, I think she's a really good writer. It just, I don't know. Like her stories are always about celebrity, and I'm not into celebrity, but I thought, let me just give it a try. Let me put it in my stack. Likewise this, mostly because this is just a beautiful book and it feels fun. And if it's not just rubbish writing, and sometimes they are, I'm sorry, that's my own personal opinion, and maybe not. This book felt like a few books that I was reading over the holidays, where I was like, this writer just really loved writing this story, and if I don't take it too seriously, they probably didn't take themselves that seriously. It's for fun. It's to just kind of get stories out there and allow space for writers of different talents. And I think like Book of the Month does that pretty well. So anyway, this is Violet Thistlethwaite Is Not a Villain Anymore. It's got, it's got garden vibes. I have a really couple of good friends who are gardeners, so I think that even if I'm like, nah, I'm not gonna, this book is beautiful, I wanted to look at it, but I'm not gonna get to it because it's not a book for me. I will pass this along to one of my gardening friends and just say, at least for that, like, there are kinds of books that I will like because they are the setting that I really like, or about a thing like cat books. We all have it. Anyway, that's enough about that. And then another little free library find is Reza Farhan's Memoirs of a Gay Shah. Iran is in the forefront of my mind, and as probably the world. And Persia, such a major empire in American history, and just Iranian stories are precious to get to because it's such a diverse place. This is someone who obviously was a Shah or had some wealth and lives in Beverly Hills. So I'm already not going to relate. I don't tend to like to read upper class anything of any era. It doesn't intrigue me, the goings-ons of the upper classes. I tend to like working class books, or people who defy class or criticize class structure and classism. Obviously, this is about someone who's gay and their journey through their identities. And the writing, I read a few pages, to me is not good at all. But I always want to make space for stories, no matter if I don't really like the writing. Sometimes it's just good to make space for stories, and books are a medium with which we can share stories. Memoirs are personal stories, are about the person. So there is less ickiness about like, who are you to write this story about these people, etc. It's not a very big book. I don't even know if I'll get all the way through it. I certainly have people who might be interested in it if I don't get to it. Little free library, Julian Barnes. I have another Julian Barnes, so this will be my second. This is a short story collection. I've since removed all my short stories, and there aren't that many, but there's enough, and put them in a little basket just to remind me to remember about short stories, because they are a different reading experience. So I thought maybe remove them from general fic. However, some authors that I have like 2 or 3 books from, I keep the short stories together. You don't need to know that about my shelves. I thought, I have been sitting on this Julian Barnes since last summer. I meant to read it last summer, the one that I have, so maybe I can read a couple short stories and see if I like this writing style. It was a little free library. The same with this Ruth Ozeki, My Year of Meals. I have another Ruth Ozeki right here, and I'm still maybe looking to haul the one that's the Women's Prize for Fiction longlister. The Ruth Ozeki I read, I liked but didn't like. I had some criticisms, but I thought, for a little free library, give it a chance. And this probably won't go in that similar stack. It'll probably sit by my other Ruth Ozeki. This is a thrift store, 50 Words for Rain by Asha Lenny. I think this book was really hyped some years ago. And the thrift store situation was buy 4, get the 5th free. So that's what I'm doing with that. Anyway, this is a story about a woman whose father was a Black American serviceman and mother stationed in Japan, and mother's Japanese, and her growing up in Japan as someone who has descendancy through more than one race and culture, and obviously looking at the world through this lens of all of the different ways you can explain rain through words. And I think that is directly related to just all of the different experiences one can have when trying to understand their identities. I don't know if I talked about this before, so I'm gonna now. This is The Rachel Incident by Carolyn O'Donoghue. This I got at Friends of the Library, actually not this week, maybe last week. And it ensued a whole conversation around, not 100% of Irish authors. Like, I read In the Woods by Tara French and didn't like it at all. But generally, if one wants to just take a chance, I think just the Irish writing culture cultivates good writing. We'll see. This has some nice colors that match a display shelf up front, and that's where it shall go soon. Thomas King's Indians on Vacation. The premise of this book is so great. So Thomas King, it doesn't say his tribe, it just says Ottawa. And I then said, I will assume Ojibwe. What a weird assumption. Why would I? Where someone lives doesn't denote that. So I had to retract those sayings when I was talking, those statements when I was talking to folks. I do wish his bio said his tribe. For my own self, I like to know tribes, but I also like for people to name tribes as though they name countries. But anyway, that's my own diatribe. The premise of this is that he found like a great uncle. Thomas King found like his great uncle's postcards from a trip to Europe like 100 years ago, and then that's what made him start thinking, like, what would this trip for this First Nations person over in Europe 100 years ago be like? Fun. A book in translation, which is Stockholm by Noah Yedlin. I don't know about this cover. The vibes of this cover make it feel like a much older book than it is. This kind of feels like, I had a lot of books circa the 90s that whose cover designs were similar to this. However, this book won an award in Israel in 2016, and I believe this translation is 2021 or 2023. The translator is Jessica Cohen, and I love the premise of this book. I like older characters in books, and I like especially, friendship groups of older characters in books when done well, when done not over stereotypically, when done with a lot of grace. This friend group has a friend who won the Nobel Prize for economics and then passes. And because they want to celebrate this accomplishment, I'm assuming because like the group, it's like an accomplishment for the group, they abscond the fact that this person has passed. And thus it feels like this is going to have some humor in it. And yeah, some reflection about, you know, kind of end of life scenarios or later stages of life. Mother Doll by Katya Apaninka. This is a Russian American story, and this is about obviously a relationship between a daughter and her mother. I love daughter-mother relationship explorations. Lauren Groff blurbs the front, and a few years ago I did hear some hype around this book and thought if I run into it, I'd pick it up, and I did. This I got at the thrift store. Same with The Lost Apothecary. Yeah, the Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I feel like this is going to be a little bit over commercialized, but I am willing to give it a chance. I have another Europa edition book about an apothecary written in like maybe by an Italian author that I think would be kind of fun to read in the same time. This I did get at a thrift shop, so I mean, we could have called it my free book after the 4th, but I did pay for it. I usually don't want to pay for books that, like, this would be more like the kind of book I would choose from a little free library, but I bit the bullet and paid for it. And so, yeah, it also feels like a good book to read now during Women's History. And just so my TBR is 2, it's just 2. Once Upon a River by Dan Setterfield, London. I believe it's the Thames is the river. And I believe there's some suspense in this book. I do like books about water and rivers. So I think this came from Friends of the Library. And this is the Friends of the Library is where I'll even pay for experimental books because, you know, I'm contributing to something I really believe in. And yeah, this is a little thicker than I really don't have a problem with big books. I mean, they have to keep my attention, and maybe that's a me problem, but I do like books about river and water, and that's why I got that. This one was kind of, I was a little bit coerced into getting it. I'm glad. This is Sucker Punch by Sachi Cole, and these are essays. The thing about essays is one does not have to read all essays in a row. Kind of when you're in a, same with short stories, right? When you're in a like fiction reading phase, as I am, you kind of forget that like books, not all books have to be read cover to cover in the order that they're published, although people think carefully about that order. You have a little bit more control as a reader of reading one essay that seems to be salient for the time, or and then putting it away and reading another one at another time in any order. So yeah, I'm excited to have it. Just these essays feel punchy, and I need to remember that like just stopping and reading an essay or a short story on a day when I'm on a book hangover or something it's got good access. 1,000 Steps into the Night by Tracy Chee. This just seems like a fun book. It almost feels in the same category as some of the others that I said, that this author like had a story, they really wanted to tell it. I don't know how spectacular the writing is. I've read into it just a little, and that's okay. You know, I want to make space for the stories. This, you know, gives some fantasy vibes. Doesn't always work with me, but I want to keep trying. I did get this at thrift again, so it's a little weird that I paid, $3. So, but I generally am trying to, you know, one way to limit myself is to not pay for books that I'm a little experimental with, and just, you know, understand that those can be in those stacks that I find at little free libraries, etc. Little Free Library because it doesn't have a dust jacket, but I actually was happy to find this book. This is Knife by Salman Rushdie, and my Salman Rushdie's right here. And this is his memoir about his attack. Yeah, and I don't normally read memoir, but Salman Rushdie is an excellent. Part of the reason I don't read memoir is because, well, no need to go into it. Anyway, Salman Rushdie is an excellent author, even though sometimes it's like too absurd and magic realism goes a bit. I mean, I'm like, what the heck is going on in his book? I found that reading Ohan Pamuk's memoir really helped me read his fiction. So it's, this will sit on nonfiction for the time that my books sit on nonfictions. Sometimes it feels like forevermore, but nonfiction just has a different vibe. And I don't care that it doesn't have a dust jacket. I mean, I like this bookshelf to look nice. And I do have display books, but I also love bunged up and books that wouldn't, like the content's still the same, if you know what I mean. The Shakespeare Requirement by Julie Schumacher. I think this is like witty humor. Not always my vibe, but I can do quirky, and I am hopefully going to read a Shakespeare nonfiction for the 52 book club. I have another sort of like couple Shakespeare retellings, and I'm just wondering if this is my year, like slowly threaded in throughout the year of just kind of doing these Shakespeare related things. I had another friend who wanted to read sonnets with me the other day, and I thought that's interesting. I haven't thought about Shakespeare in a long time as such. And so, yeah, I think maybe just like totally low-key undercurrent thread, some Shakespeare stuff going on. And from what I can tell, like looking into my pretty dense reading future, this would be maybe a summer book. It could be a fun summer book. Speaking of which, Joan is Okay by Wakey Wing. This is about an emergency room doctor. ICU doctor, yeah. I haven't spent very much time in medical settings. This gives like daughter of immigrants with a lot of pressure to overachieve, and then really living like the body, soul, and mind living with the consequences of like that hypervigilance and that overachievement. Lily King blurbed it, and I was reading Euphoria when I hauled this book, so that's kind of what made me do it. And you know, this is one of those like, when am I gonna get to this? But I have plenty of those. I mean, I look at my shelf, so I have many of those, so I don't need to overthink. That's it. So what am I gonna do now? Put all of these books away and see if they fit, because one day they're not going to, and then I have to decide what does a book hoarder do when they no longer have like designated space. According to my friends, I have way more space that I'm not utilizing, but I do like aesthetics too. So, you know, it's going to be an ongoing conversation, like literally every time I haul books. That's it. And because my hauls are not small. So how much did I pay for all of these books? Probably under $50, if I'm being honest, for all these books. Maybe a little bit more, but the point is, you know, at brunch, I spent more than these books. Is that a justification? Sure. Yeah. But it does thrill me. Like the thrift of it is part of the thrilling nature. So for that, I'm bringing it up. Anyway, I won't publish this until after my review video, which should be coming up today or tomorrow. I'm about done with my last week's TBR. Yeah, so that's probably how like sort of like my editing publishing cycle will go. But until then, or until the next video, thanks for being bookish with me.